We talked about the mother bird, and we talked about building a house. We talked about, what do you call it, about not wearing shatnez and not mixing. Now, the next two sections of the Torah involve the following. I want to just make something clear. We're not going to go into the details here, but if you the bottom of page 1050, Ki yikach ishisha ubay lo snea. A man marries a woman and he does not like her, so he starts a rumor. He accuses her falsely. V'samla alilos dvarim v'hotzi aleh shem ra. He is what's called a motzi shem ra. You can join up. Move up a little. Move up. Page 1052 now. So this man who does not want to stay married to her, he starts a false accusation. And this false accusation is that his wife, after the point of betrothal, she cheated, which is a potential life-threatening accusation, because if she's guilty, so she's committed adultery. Now, they have a court case. So if it's true, first the Torah says, what if it's not true? Now, if you take a look, the father comes to court, and they have an entire court case. And then what happens to this guy? If it turns out that it was a false accusation, she has not been unfaithful. 7 lines from the top, 1052. V'lakchu ziknei ha'ir hahi. 7 lines from the top, last word. V'lakchu ziknei ha'ir hahi es ha'ish. The elders of the town take the man, the Beis Din. V'yisro. He gets flogged. Number 1. V'anshu oso mea kesef. And then they give him, he also has to pay 100 pieces of silver. V'nosu lavianara ki hotzi shemra al bisulas Yisrael. Because he cast aspersions on his young lady. Velosi Isha, she shall become his wife. Lo yuchal l'shalcha kol yamav. He cannot divorce her. How's that for a punishment? Hold all the questions for a few minutes. He can't even divorce her. He can't divorce her. So he's got a triple whammy over here. Number 1, he gets flogged. Number 2, he pays money. Number 3, he's married to this woman who the Gemara says is a fate worse than death. Umotzani marmi moves as Aisha. The Gemara says that to be married, the Gemara says that in Eretz Yisrael, when a guy would get married, they would say to him, matzah or motze. Guy would get married, they'd say matzah or motze. What is matzah or motze? They're 2 psukim. One pasuk says, matzah isha, matzah tov. If you found a wife, you found good. And there's another pasuk that says, umotze ani marmi moves as isha. I found a wife more bitter than death. That's what the 2 psukim by Shlomo HaMelech. So after a guy got married, they would say to him, matzah or motze. Now, based on the second pasuk, this is obviously a guy who's not happy with her. So now he's going to get a fate worse than death, because now he's stuck with her. Elisha wants to ask, what if she doesn't want to be married to him? It's a very good question. The answer to that question is, obviously she can request a divorce. If she doesn't have, the punishment is for him, not for her. We're going to get to that question. It's a good question. Now, there's a question on that Gemara. If you think about this Gemara, the Gemara says in Eretz Yisrael, b'ma'arava. Ma'arava is Eretz Yisrael. Ki nasi v'nishitza, when a man would marry a woman, amrile, they would say to him, matzah or motze. What's the obvious question? What's that? Matzah or motze, is she matzah isha matzah tov or motze ani marmi bavazisha? They ask him, which pasuk did you get? Hey buddy, you got married, how'd you do? Did you get a matzah or a motze? Right? What's the obvious problem with the Gemara? 2 obvious problems. Number 1, what the heck business is it yours? What's it your business? What are you asking me? What are you asking me? Who's in your business? Number 1. Number 2, what about Lashon Hara? What if I say to you, yeah, boy, oof, bad. And what about Lashon Hara? Good question, right? Good question. So what's going on there? The answer is that the Gemara there is giving a very interesting insight into marriage, And if you look at the wording of the Gemara is very precise. Can I trouble you just to close the door over there? All doors should be closed. Thank you. The Gemara there is giving a very interesting nature and insight into into marriage. You'll notice that first of all, the Gemara doesn't say they asked him. The Gemara say they would say to him matzah or motzei. They didn't say they asked him. It says they said to him matzah or motzei. Meaning, it sounds like they're almost coming to give this guy who just got married, they want to give him a little bit of a reminder here. Hey, buddy, take a tip from me. Matzah or motzei, what does that mean? Matzah is past tense. Matzah isha, matzah tov. That means if your attitude in your marriage is, I found her, the search is over, this is the one I meant to fight with through eternity, then you're going to be a happy person. Matzah isha, matzah, that's going to be good. If you're convinced this is the one, this is your soulmate, this is the one God designated for you, matzah, the search is over. So you found it, the search is over. Then matzah isha, matzah tov. Motzei is present tense. Umotzei ani marmi maves esaisha. If you're married and you're still looking around, oh, maybe it could have been this one, it could have been that one, could have been this one, could have been that one, then it's going to be more bitter than death. So according to the Gemara's not there. We're not asking a question. We don't want an answer. I don't want an answer. I'm telling you, I'm giving you a tip when you get married. Keep in mind, if you're in matzah mode or motzei mode. If you're in matzah mode, it'll be good. If you're in motzei mode, it won't be good. It'll be bitter than death. This guy's stuck. This guy cast aspersions on her, started a false rumor, a terrible rumor that she was an unfaithful from Jewish girl. You can't divorce her even if you want to. Now, take a look at the bottom of the page. 1052, all the way at the bottom, 6 lines from the bottom. Here the Torah talks about a different crime. Torah talks about a different crime. He finds a young lady, utfasa v'shachaviba, v'nimtzo. The guy goes and he violates her. What we call rape. What happens in halacha? Now, if she's a married woman, he's executed, because then it's like forced adultery. It's a capital. Well, she's a single girl, because according to halacha, a single girl, it's not a capital offense. Two people who are behaving immorally is not a capital offense. There are other prohibitions, but it's not capital offense unless the woman's a married woman. So what happens to the guy? Here he pays 50 pieces of silver. She becomes his wife. He can't divorce her. You violated her, you're going to marry her. You're going to pay a fine, and you're going to marry her. So this goes back to Tuvia's question yesterday, but you don't get double whammy. Torah says here you do. These are the exceptional cases, number one. Number two, you see that verbal, what they call nowadays verbal abuse. Right? A wife sometimes complains, my husband is verbally abusive. Why? He yelled at me. That's not verbal abuse, that's marriage. But but here, the rumor monger, the guy who spread the rumor, he, for verbal violation, pays 100. For the physical violation, only 50. And then he also can't divorce her. What's the obvious question that people are always bothered by, what Alicia asked before? What woman would want to marry a guy who's a rapist? What woman would want to marry this guy? That's what people are always bothered by. So first of all, you have to understand, number one, it doesn't have to be that he grabbed her in the dark in Central Park. It could be a couple that knew each other already, and the guy got a little carried away, like they call date rape or whatever they call it. So he got carried away. There's a guy she likes. It just he has some trouble with his midos. It could be one of those issues. Okay, number one. Number two, you have to understand from the woman's perspective. In a society today, we can't relate to it because of what's happened to the society. Primarily, I think the thing that really broke it open was the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War is what really created the than Woodstock and all that nonsense, which started as the society became so far left and liberal that there are no values, there's no shame, there's no nothing. There was one time the world was more conservative. In the world we live in today, it's hard to relate to, but there was a time where a woman who was damaged goods would find it hard to get married. No man's going to marry her. Man's only going to marry a woman who's never been with another man. So now this girl's you got two choices. You can either stay and remain unmarried, or you can marry this guy. Okay, you like the guy, but he just got carried away a little bit. So she doesn't have to, he has to marry her, she doesn't have to marry him. But you have to understand from the woman's perspective, this might be the best option right now that's available to her. Because again, in that society. And if she wants, she doesn't have to marry. She's not married to him yet. So there's no divorce over here. But if she wants, she could marry the guy. If she doesn't want, so she said no. But sometimes from a woman's perspective, this is better than anything. I think I told you, I mentioned this yesterday in Shir, the woman's in court, and her husband's accused of burglary. So the judge said to the lady, when you got married, you knew he was a burglar? She goes, yeah. He says, then why did you marry him? She goes, well, I was getting a little older, and it was a choice between him and a lawyer. So I decided to marry the burglar. So sometimes in life you got to go for the better choice. Whatever, it may not be the great choice, but the better choice. So here, okay, that's all I want to say about that. Let's go on. Take a look at the Torah goes through various mitzvahs, and then the bottom of page 1054. 1054. So it says like this: Ki Seitzei machane aloivecha. When you go out against your enemies, v'nishmarta mikol davara. Now we're talking about a Jewish military campaign, and they have to keep the Jewish camp pure. So if a man has some sort of emission which makes him impure, he has to leave the camp. So it shouldn't be considered. The camp should not become defiled. We want to keep the Kedusha in the camp. Then the Torah says one of the most bizarre halachas that we're going to find in the Torah. Top of page 1056. Now remember, we're in a military campaign here. And the Torah says, V'yad tiyelecha michutz lamachane. Yad means a specific location. Yad over here does not mean a hand. V'yad tiyelecha michutz lamachane. You should have a location outside the camp. V'yatzasa shama chutz, and you go outside when you have to relieve yourself. Okay, we understand that you're going to go relieve yourself, not where the people are. But v'yaseid tiyelecha, you should have a shovel or a spade, however you translate. How's the article translated? A shovel. Ala zeinecha, with your equipment. V'haya b'shiftecha chutz. So when you go out of the camp to relieve yourself, v'chafarta ba, you'll dig with the shovel, v'shavta v'chisisa tzesecha, then you'll cover up what you did. Oh, how considerate. You're going off to war, and people are shooting things at each other, and their missiles are flying, and swords and arrows, and people are white. But, it's like on the airplane. They have a sign in the bathroom on there, please be considerate for the next customer. Because all of a sudden, we're worried about that. I cut ahead of all these people in line, and I grabbed the best seat, but all of a sudden, now be considerate next person. So here you're going off to war, and number one, cover it over to be considerate for next people. And not only that, you have an obligation when you go to war to have this piece of equipment. So you have a handheld rocket launcher, and you have a few hand grenades, and then what do you call it? An AK-47. And a shovel to cover the poopy. Oh, that's so nice of you. That's so considerate of you. That's a fundamental piece of equipment for Jews who are going off to war. What's going on here? The answer is, and this goes back to the beginning of the Parsha, where we talk about the beautiful woman and that the Torah releases the restriction because we understand that a man at war, when a person went off to war, and we see last week's Parsha, when you were laying siege to a city, the Torah says, don't wantonly chop down trees just because. Don't just go chopping. So the Torah says, listen, there's a very big danger when a person goes to war. You go off to war, kill or be killed, you could easily enter a semi-animal state, a savage state. The Torah says, I want you to do something that's going to remind you of your human dignity. You're going to maintain your human dignity and self-respect. Every time you relieve yourself, every few hours, when you go to relieve yourself, take a shovel and cover it up. Or remind yourself that you're a human being. And that'll put some sort of, have a sobering effect on you in the war situation. It's a reminder, not, hi, just go wild, you're what do you call it? You're a human being. You're in a rough situation. It's war, kill or be killed. Right? There's a lot of blood, but it just puts that much of a restraint on you. And therefore, the Torah says not only you have to do it, you have to have the piece of equipment so that you're prepared to do it. All of which serves as a reminder for the person of who the person actually is. Okay. Now, there's if you look at the end of the pasuk, in pasuk 3 lines from the top. Ki Hashem, we'll take it completely out of context here now. Ki Hashem Elokecha misalech b'kerev machanecha. For Hashem your God is with you. Lehatzilcha, to save you. V'lo seis oivecha lefanecha. And Hashem will cause your enemies to fall before you. V'haya machanecha kadosh. Your camp shall be holy. Your camp should be holy. The camp should be holy. Now the Gemara says that the expression v'haya is an expression which introduces simcha, joy. There's happiness, there's joy. So the Mefarshim say like this: v'haya machanecha kadosh. It feeds on each other. When a Jew is in a state of simcha, that's kedusha. V'haya machanecha kadosh. If you're a v'haya, if you're happy, machanecha kadosh, then you're going to achieve kedusha. If you're in a state of simcha, you'll achieve kedusha. But it works the other way, the other backwards as well. If you're in kedusha, if we behave with holiness, then we'll achieve v'haya. They feed on each other. The more holy, the more joy, the more kedusha. The more kedusha, the more joy. The more kedusha, the more joy. The more joy, the more kedusha. What we need to understand is what's kedusha. We need to understand what's holy, what's simcha. That's a different question. What is happiness in Judaism? We always hear about Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha. What is Ivdu es? And you notice what my arms just did as I said that. Ivdu es Hashem, right? That was independent. They just kind of moved around as I said. Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha. That's not necessarily simple. They get rid of your restlessness. Could be I need Ritalin. It has nothing to do with simcha. Simcha means that a person is upbeat and energized in his Judaism. That's what simcha is. Simcha does not mean jumping on a trampoline on top of a car that's playing loud music in the middle of the street with vodka. That's not simcha. Not bad, but it's not simcha. That's not simcha. Simcha means that my attitude, I'm upbeat, I'm a healthy-minded person, and I'm energized. And simcha doesn't mean like that. That's not simcha. That's artificial. For most people, it's artificial. That's not simcha. Simcha means I'm energized what I'm doing. Kedusha means the word kadosh. When you say hareat mikudeshas li, what is hareat mikudeshas? When you betroth a woman, what is hareat mikudeshas? What do the words mean? Mikudeshas, hareat mikudeshas li means that I am now forfeiting my credit card to you. That's hareat mikudeshas li. No, then there goes the simcha. No. Hareat mikudeshas means you are separated from everybody else. Kedusha means separation. Hareyat mikudeshes li. You are separated from everybody else, designated for me. You're separated from all the rest. Kedusha means separating ourselves from negative influences. Kedusha doesn't mean jumping in a mikveh 613 times. Kedusha means avoiding the inappropriate things and then using the simcha to do the proper things. So double. Avoid the negative, be enthusiastic about doing what we have to do. That's the definition of simcha, that's the definition of kedusha. Okay, any questions on that? Good. Let's go on. Take a look at this. We actually came across in the Gemara, so let's learn it. I wasn't gonna mention this, but if we already did it in the Gemara, so we may as well take a look. Take a look at Pasuk Yud Tes. It's about halfway down the page. Lo savi esnan zona umechir kelev beis Hashem Elokecha. You do not bring the payment for a harlot or the exchange of a dog to the house of God, l'chol neder, to pay off, to bring offerings for any vows or pledges you might have made. Ki toavas Hashem Elokecha gam shnehem. Now what that means is like this. Let's say a guy, and we just learned in the Gemara that even if he contracts to pay the harlot, he has to fulfill it, right? Even though he shouldn't have done it, but you told her, you promised her you would pay her, you have an obligation to pay her now. Now what if you pay her a sheep? You give her a sheep in exchange for her services. And then she turns around and takes a sheep and goes to the Beis HaMikdash to bring it as a korban. That, the Torah says, is an abomination. Don't bring it to the Beis HaMikdash. I'm not interested in the sheep that a harlot received for her services. Why? What's underlying it? And the same thing when it comes with a dog. If I have a dog and I barter my dog for your sheep, and then I take the sheep to the Beis HaMikdash, that's also considered what do you call it? Inappropriate. What's wrong with it? This woman goes up. I mean, can't you do tshuva? She'd like to, what's that?
It's been used for sin and has touched him.
So that's what it certainly sounds like. But what ultimately is wrong with it? It's been used. It sounds tainted. It's soiled. A dog, anything involving a dog is always degrading. A dog. I pointed out once. I don't know of any sports team. Sports teams are called lions, tigers, bears, eagles, falcons, vultures, and I don't know of any sports team that's just called the dogs. Bulldogs, yes, because bulldogs are cool. A bulldog, but no, nobody's called the dogs. They have nicknames, the dogs. Even the Razorbacks, the Arkansas Razorbacks, the Hogs, right? But nobody's called the dog. Just the Georgia, the Bulldogs. But bulldog is cool. Nobody's got just a dog. Because a dog is considered a low creature, a low animal. A dog's a low animal. So you exchange it for a dog, it's disrespectful. What ultimately is going on here? So Mepharshim say, sometimes a woman like that, let's say this woman who's a harlot, she might want to soothe her conscience a little bit. So she behaves, she does what she's doing. It's almost like you steal money and then you give 10% to tzedakah. Like a Jewish Robin Hood. A Jewish Robin Hood. What we would call Ruvain Hood, right? Ruvain Yehuda, right? Ruvain Hood, right? Robin Hood. Wait, a Jewish Robin Hood. Yeah, why? Because that way it'll soothe my conscience. I steal, but at least I give tzedakah. No good. So a woman behaves this way, then somebody paid her a sheep. She says, you know what, I'll go give this. See, I'm not all bad. No. It's an abomination. And the same thing when it comes to a dog, because a dog may very well have been a vicious dog. And if you have a vicious dog, who knows what your vicious dog did before you sold it to somebody else? And so I exchanged it, I bartered it with you, and you gave me a sheep. Now I'm going to take the sheep and bring it to the Beis HaMikdash in order to soothe my conscience. No good. And therefore the Torah says, don't do that. The Torah says, don't bring that to the Beis HaMikdash. They're both an abomination. Now, take a look, skip on now to Perek Chaf Daled. Okay, this is a basic the basic laws of divorce now, and we're going to try to answer a couple of questions that come up on a regular basis. Page 1058. Ki yikach ish isha ube'olah, a man wears a woman, v'haya im lo simsa chen be'ena. 5 lines from the top, page 1058. V'haya im lo simsa chen be'ena, if she does not find favor in his eyes. Ki matza ba ervas davar, he found something that he feels inappropriate. V'kasav la sefer krisus, he writes a book of severing, a document of severing, what we call what? A get. A document of severing. V'nasan biyada, he puts it in her hand. V'shulcha b'beisa, he puts it in her hand. He sends her out of his house. Now, first of all, it's an interesting thing. The only time that the letter Gimel and Tes appear together in any word in the entire Hebrew language is in the word get. That's the only time you have a gimel followed by a tes. And then it's separated forever. The get separates them. They're joined. The get is the last time that these two people are going to be together, and then from that point on they're separate. It's the only time these two letters are together is a get. It could be that, it could be symbolically that it's showing the regret that they're getting divorced. At the end of the day, there's a get. Now, according to the letter of the halacha, a man, I mean, we know nowadays, the husband has to give his wife a get. By Torah law, we could force him. If a Beis Din determines that she has a valid reason to demand a get, which could be lack of support, he's not treating her properly, certainly physical abuse. If a woman complains that she wants a get, then the Beis Din will force the husband to give the get. But if the husband does not want to give a get, nowadays he can't be forced. Now the question everybody asks, I know in secular law, they just had a case, I think it was a guy in Minnesota who faked his own death. Did you hear about this? The guy went kayaking and he faked his own death, that they found the kayak, and in the meantime what he did was, and he got rid of he bought himself a passport. He flew out of the country and he met another woman somewhere. The woman that he had met on the internet. He met and they had an affair somewhere in Russia, and then finally the FBI convinced him to come back. He came back home and his wife of 22 years divorced him. A woman can't divorce her husband in halacha. A man could divorce his wife. Why is that? There's a very logical reason. And what's the reason? The man made the acquisition. The man when you get married, you give your wife the ring, and you say, Hareat Mekudesh Esli, you have taken possession. Not only that, a husband in halacha is called a Baal, the owner. You have taken over ownership of her. That's why all the marriage obligations are on the husband. Financial obligations on the husband. So if you buy a table, the only way to relinquish owner, the table can't relinquish ownership of itself. You have to make the table hefker. You have to declare the table ownerless, or you sell the table, because it's mine. That's mine to do with what I want. So a woman has been acquired by the husband. Obviously, logically, the one who severs, the one who gives her the release is the one who is now taking over ownership of her. You know, people have to understand, sometimes people put a ksuba up. People, when they get married, they have the ksuba, which is the marriage document. They put little flowers around it. They get the calligraphy, and they put it up on the wall, very fancy in a frame. It's like putting your mortgage with flowers around it in a frame and putting it up on the wall. The ksuba is basically a financial obligation that the husband has to the wife. So why doesn't she have financial obligation to the husband? Because the husband has taken the same way that you have to care for your table, you have to care for your wife. I'm only using the analogy, though the wives are much louder than the table. I'm only using the tables are quiet. I'm only using it unless they have a squeak, right? Which is also But I'm only using the analogy as ownership, which also explains why when a man dies, his sons inherit the money, not the daughters. There's a method to this madness. Of course the sons inherit, because they're the ones who are going to have to take on support of somebody else. The daughters aren't going to have to take on support. They're going to be supported. And if they're not supported by a husband, they'll be supported by their brothers. So the money stays by the people who have the financial obligation. And so the husband is the one who has to initiate the get. Now, watch what happens here. Then the Torah says in Pasuk Beis, V'yatsa mi beiso, this woman leaves his house, v'holcha v'haisa li'ish acher. Then she marries a second guy. Now he divorced her. She married a second guy. Usneya ha'ish acher, and the second guy doesn't like her. It sounds like a real winner over here. V'kasav la sefer krisus. Now he gave her a divorce. V'nasan biyada v'shilcha mi beiso. O kiyomu se'ish acher, or if the second guy died, whether the second husband died or divorced her. Asher lekacha leisha. Then the Torah says, Lo yuchal bala harishon asher shilcha loshuv lekach l'lios l'isha. The first husband can't remarry her. The first husband cannot remarry her once she's been married to another man. Now, what about, so the first question is, why? And not only that, I'll make it even more extreme. Reuven divorced his wife, Leah. Leah went and married Shimon. Shimon either died or divorced her. Leah cannot go back to marry Reuven, correct? Good. What about if Reuven divorced Leah, and then Leah went and had an illicit relationship with Shimon? Then, what did you say? Then she could come back to the original husband and he could remarry her. How do you like that? What's that? What's what? Illicit. Illicit means that not halachically okay. In other words, Reuven divorced Leah. Again, Reuven divorced Leah. Leah then married Shimon according to halacha, and Shimon gave her a valid halachic divorce, or Shimon died. Or he committed suicide to get away from Leah. Whatever the case may be. She cannot go back and marry Reuven. If Reuven divorced her and she just lived with Shimon, not according to the halacha, then she could go back and Reuven could marry her again. Why? If she did something right, he can't remarry her. If she did something wrong, he could remarry her. Why? Good question, right?
There was no intermediate purchase.
Therefore what?
Therefore, technically, she never was owned by somebody else, so he's just taking her back. If she was owned by somebody else, then he's kind of buying back his...
Okay, that's true. She was never owned by somebody else. That's true. Interesting. Now he's just taking back what was once yours, even though it's been misused or violated. Okay, could be. There's merit to what you're saying.
The language the Parsha uses is after she had been defiled. Why is that? The fact that she's been...
Meaning relative to him. Relative to him, she's considered defiled.
What does that mean?
impure.
Relative to him, she's considered defiled. Okay, so the idea is like this. If everything is done according to halacha, you could get into sanctioned wife swapping. And you haven't broken any halachas. Reuven will divorce her, she'll marry Shimon, he'll divorce her, she'll go back to Reuven. Everybody's kosher. That's the Torah's concerned. That's why it could kito eva, it could become an abomination. What about the guy, Reuven divorces her and then she has an illicit relationship with Shimon? That's not going to it doesn't happen that often. We don't know how often is that going to happen that we have to be concerned about it. If it's all done in the kosher way, then you have to worry that this could become something that people, well, listen, it's all kosher. Huh? It's a legal loophole. And that's one of the things nowadays, we figured out a way to get around the problem. But just wait. We figured out a way to get around the problem. How do we get around the problem? We've gotten around the problem of cheeseburgers. Because you could have a beef burger with parva cheese, and you could have a parva burger with milchik cheese. Baruch Hashem, we could have beef. We could have cheeseburger. I see, Alicia. I'll get to you, and I'll get to you. Just hold for a couple. We have all the ways to get around it. It has to do with the attitude. Is there 613 mitzvos, or there are 613 problems? We got around the problem of meat and milk. We got around the problem of shaitels. We got around the problem of mechitzas, because you have a two-way mirror that's kind of technically... The Torah is not looking to get around problems. We have mitzvahs over here. We have commands. When it's all legitimate, then there's a bigger danger here than when... Because we're talking about from people. So most people aren't going to commit something illicit. They're not going to do something inappropriate. And therefore, that's not a concern. The concern is when you're doing everything right. Then you could end up in trouble. How do you like that? If you're doing it right, you can end up in trouble. Yes, Alicia, what do you want to ask?
Okay, so except for Melachim, that when Melech David's son slept...
I can't answer an outside question.
No,
I
this
don't.
is regarding to this. You said that if she's married and she goes and she has illicit relations with another man, she could go back to her husband. Why in the case of Melech David's son, when he slept with his sister, she was afraid that nobody would want me, you defiled me. They wasn't even married, he just slept with her. So why is it, if that's the case, nobody would want to marry her?
She was worried they wouldn't want to marry her because she's been violated. Like we said earlier, that once a woman is damaged goods, so then it's going to make her less tempting for people to want to marry her.
I don't understand.
So I'll explain to you again. Here we're talking about where she did something illicit. She's allowed to go back to her first husband. She's permitted to go back and remarry her first husband. The case you're bringing up is where she was violated and she was worried nobody's going to want her, not that nobody's allowed to marry her. You hear the difference? Okay. Now, that's there was a case in I don't remember what it was it was in the 70s. There were two players on the New York Yankees, Fritz Peterson and Mike Kikich. Do you remember that, Tuvia? You don't remember that? Fritz Peterson and Mike Kikich. And you guys don't know this? In Philadelphia. Yeah, but I was in Chicago and I know it. So the entire United States knew that. There was Fritz Peterson and Mike Kikich was a very famous case because they were particularly because they were baseball players. And in baseball, there are trades. You could trade players from one team to another. Well, Fritz Peterson started driving home from the ballpark with Mrs. Kikich. And Mike Kikich started driving home from the ballpark with Mrs. Peterson. And eventually what they did is they just traded wives and families. They traded. They just, okay, I'll be there. They traded. And it was a very big thing in the United States. They even got booed in the Yankee Stadium. You don't go trading families, trading wives. And then eventually what happened was Fritz Peterson and Mrs. Kikich stayed married. And Mike Kikich and Mrs. Peterson, they got divorced a short while later. But there was a famous trade. That was probably the most famous baseball trade in history. that was a famous trade. And they even got booed. People were, don't do that. And the reason it became, see if it was just somewhere in Tennessee, nobody would have said anything, but some family, a couple of guys in Tennessee, nobody would have said anything. They'd even say, you're a redneck. You're a redneck if you're married 3 times and you have the same set of in-laws. Nobody would have said anything. But over here, you had what you call, you're a redneck if you got a brother. If you got a family member, the last thing he said before he died was, "Hey y'all, watch this." So they what do you call it? So nobody would. It made a big issue because they were baseball players used to trading. They traded family. The Torah says it's an abomination. And therefore the Torah says, and it has to do with the attitude. We're not trying to get around it.
So this is pointing out the loophole that does exist.
The loophole, if this would be permitted, then you could have a loophole. One day you're married to her, the next day you're married to somebody else. Just say, and everybody's kosher.
But
Hashem doesn't want that. Hashem doesn't want that. Wife swapping, you could get into kosher wife swapping. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want it. Okay, we're going to stop here, gentlemen.